Did you know?
History books for life. History books for life.
And
Africa is not our home. Oh, while I dare Africa is not our home.
because
The Indians for you. The Indians for you. The Indians for you.
that's why.
Finds himself in exile in his own land. His own land.
So,
You just want to claim a spot for the whole thing.
because
We were always here. We were always here. We were always here. We were always here.
Welcome to the Aboriginal Channel. On this episode, we're going to be debunking the fictitious story in history titled The Great Migration. Here on the history website, history.com, there's an article that was originally uploaded in March of 2010 and updated in May of 2019. The Great Migration was the relocation of more than 6 million African Americans from the rural South to the cities of the North, Midwest, and West from about 1916 to 1970. Pause. So when we go and look at the numbers, that's the dates that we're going to be dealing with from basically 1910 to 1970. We're going to look at the population count by race at the southern states and compare the increases and decreases. So we'll look at the southern states and see how the black population decreased from the years 1910 to 1970. And then we'll go and look at the northern states and see how they increased in black population from 1910 to 1970. But here I'll read a little more. Driven from their homes by unsatisfactory economic opportunities and harsh segregationist laws, many blacks headed north, where they took advantage of the need for industrial workers that first arose during the First World War. During the Great Migration, African Americans began to build a new place for themselves in public life, actively confronting racial prejudice as well as economic, political, and social challenges to create a black urban culture that would exert enormous influence in the decades to come. When World War I broke out in Europe in 1914, industrialized urban areas in the North, Midwest, and West faced a shortage of industrial laborers. As the war put an end to the steady tide of European immigration to the United States, with war production kicking into high gear, recruiters enticed African Americans to come north, to the dismay of white Southerners. Black newspapers, particularly the widely read Chicago Defender, published advertisements taunting the opportunities available in the cities of the North and West, along with first-person accounts of success. So they're saying that they were recruiting black folks in the South through the Chicago Defender and talking about the opportunities, and that's why people migrated that way, is what they're trying to get us to believe right here in this article. Once again, when we look at the numbers, we're looking at the years between 1910 and 1970. I particularly looked up the 12 southern states that they're saying these so-called black folks migrated from, and also looked at 12 northern states that they said they migrated to. And the numbers are drastically different. Of the 12 states of the South, I calculate 837,000 people left those states in between the years of 1910 and 1970. There was an increase by 8.5 million in the 12 northern states during the years of 1910 through 1970. In the state of Alabama in 1910, they had 908,000 people, but it decreased 10 years later, 8,000 people. It went up again, then it decreased again. It decreased 4,000 people. So you go up and it decreased again from 1960 to 1970. So basically you got a decrease down here of 8,000, then another decrease of 4, which is 12, and then another decrease of 1, which is 13, and then basically a decrease of 80,000. So that would bring that decrease to 93,000. Here in Arkansas, between the years 1910 and 1970, there was a 120,000 decrease in black population. So 120,000 left during that time. In Florida, between 1910 and 1970, there was 90,000 decreased in black population. 90,000 blacks left during that time. So far, we got 93,000 from Alabama, 120 from Arkansas, 90,000 from Florida. And here in Georgia, there was 157,000 black people that left between 1910 and 1970. In Kentucky, 60,000 blacks left Kentucky between 1910 and 1970. In Louisiana, between 1910 and 1970, only 13,000 black people left the state, as you can see right here. So it decreased right here from 1910 to 1920. It went down 13,000 people. In Mississippi, 205 black people left the state between 1910 and 1970. In North Carolina, in between 1910 and 1970, there was no decrease in the black population. South Carolina had 110,000 black people leave in between the years of 1910 and 1970. Tennessee had 20,000 people leave the state in between the years 1910 and 1970. As you look right here at 1910, it had 473,000 black. 10 years later, it had 451. So that's lacking about 22,000. That's the only time Tennessee decreased in black population. The rest of the years, it always went up. In Texas, between the years 1910 and 1970, there was never a decrease. Texas black population always increased. Virginia had 40,000 black people leave its state between the years 1910 and 1970. So that concludes the 12 southern states. If you add all those numbers up, 20,000 in Tennessee, none in Texas, 40,000 in Virginia, 93 in Alabama, 120,000 from Arkansas, 90,000 from Florida, Georgia 157, none from North Carolina, 60,000 from Kentucky, 13,000 from Louisiana, 205,000 from Mississippi, and 110,000 from South Carolina. All that adds up to 910,000. I may have said 837,000, but I caught something as I was doing the video. So it's roughly around 910,000 blacks that migrated in between 1910 and 1970. On the other hand, you have the 12 northern states that the black population increased. And when you add all that up, it comes to 8.5 million. I'll give you two examples of the northern states. Here's Illinois. The black population from 1910 to 1970 increased 1.3 million black people. So in that one state, would the 800 or 910,000 blacks that migrated from the southern states in between 1910 and 1970 could have all went to Illinois, and there would still be room for others according to these numbers. New York had 2 million black people migrate between the years 1910 and 1970. As you go here to 1910, it says 134,000. You go up to 1970, it says 2,163,000. So over 2 million blacks migrated there in between those years. As we studied the numbers, we can see that there's a couple of occurrences within, and they correlate to something a little more sinister than what the article said about why blacks left the South because of Jim Crow laws and this and that. However, if you look right here, there was, in Mississippi, there was a decrease in population in between 1910 and 1920. Those are the years of all the Black Wall Streets, because there was more than a few, let alone the one in Tulsa. There was a lot going on during that time, and they were dubbed the Black Wall Streets. In between 1900 and 1920. Okay, when you go up here to 1940 and 1950, there was another major decrease. Now, if you remember in Mississippi, there was a man who his family owned his 270 acres since 1887. Pastor Isaacs was killed in 1940 by 6 white men, you recall. And these population of these southern states, they say the same thing. And in between 1940 and 1950, blacks were leaving. If we look right here in Louisiana, where it only had 13,000 blacks leave, those 13,000 left in between the years 1910 and 1920, the years of those Black Wall Streets. Here in Kentucky, where so many courthouses and records were being destroyed during the 1860s, you had a decrease in black population in between 1860 and 1870, and also the years of in between the years of 1940 and 1950. Again, in Georgia, between 1940 and 1950, you had a decrease in black population. Through the history books, which has all been a lie. So therefore, if it's a lie, then what's the truth? If it's a lie, then what's the truth?